I'm your host, Reena Friedman Watts, and this is the Better Call Daddy Show.
Hey, this is Big Daddy, Wayne Friedman.
That's my grandpa. Grandpa, you ready for more daddy drama?
My dad is my number one hero and number one fan.
And I'm a pretty cool dude.
All right, season 4, baby. Here we go.
More stories you're not going to believe.
And maybe you will after you listen.
5 stars.
5.5 stars, 2 thumbs up.
You are a pretty cool dude.
I love you, Mommy.
Don't stand on the table and damn the public. You'll get some words of wisdom to live by.
Here we go again. Better call Daddy.
You know what your problem is? You like me.
Yeah, I do. Each week, I interview a guest, share the stories with my dad, and then he weighs in at the end of every episode with his wisdom and wit.
Hey, Grandpa.
Everyone from influential players to inspirational fathers, and of course, controversial people.
Grandpa, my mommy's calling.
Creating that legacy one call at a time. And welcome to the Better Call Daddy Show.
Stay tuned.
Where's the music?
Better call Daddy cause he knows you best. Better call Daddy cause he's bringing the test. He sees possibilities. Such possibilities. Better call Daddy, he'll be by your side. Better call Daddy, you're the apple of his eye. He sees all that you can be. All that you can be.
Today's guest is kind of over, in quotes, making it. We are removing barriers, having a warm, open conversation. There's not a lot of places you can do that. Podcasting is the best place for it. It was a warm introduction from a past guest, Shauna. Brady, welcome to the Better Call Daddy Show. Hey.
Reena, so good to see you.
Good to see you. Where are you?
I'm actually not too far from my mom's house.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. I feel like you're a world traveler.
Always, but not as much recently because I've just had to slow down. My mom's not doing that great, so I moved back here. Yeah, she's just starting to get dementia.
Oh no.
And, like early stage, but early enough that I was like, I better just come back. And because I was living out west anyway, so I came back to just be here for her, and it's been good. She's still in like great shape in so many ways, but she just needs someone to like kind of help her.
Aw, that's awesome. I know you guys are close.
Yeah. And obviously I just don't want to travel too much because like part of the problem right now is she's having these night terrors every night and she wakes up terrified.
That man has joined.
There he is. Anyway, so I've just had to like kind of be there. It's really good.
What's up, Shauna? What's up, Reena?
Hey.
I just joined for a second because Reena and I are friends. So I wanted to say hello to her. And
You guys are friends already? Lucky.
that's the way it works. You know what's funny? I always tell people this, that the last day when they closed the border between Canada and the US for COVID, I was with you, Reena. We were making Shabbat dinner.
Memorable, right?
It was very memorable. So I always say I had to flee the country because of Reena.
That is
Which
so wild.
side did you flee to?
I fled to Canada, regrettably. Although, you know, it's funny. I then moved across the country because in Ontario, it was so strict. You weren't even allowed to have guests over to your house. Like we weren't allowed to have anyone
Most of my
over.
Canadian buddies fled to Wyoming.
Yeah, well, that's how I ended up there back in 2021 because I was like, I got to get out of Canada completely. I mean, I wasn't like a anti-vaxxer or anything. I just didn't like having to wear masks everywhere. And I didn't like not having to see people. And I saw the impact on my son so dramatically because he started university that year and it was all online. And I remember one day I came in his room and he was lying on the bed sleeping and the professor was teaching. So I like jokingly took notes. And then at dinner that night, I quizzed him. So I was like, this is crazy. But I saw the impact because he wasn't able to play hockey or do anything. And he just got so depressed. And I'd never known him to be a depressed person. Like he's always so happy and all these things. So I was like, if it's impacting him, we got to make some changes. This is crazy. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about me. I just wanted to hop in for a second and introduce you two. I met Reena years ago. She attended my event. Which is sort of how I got introduced to Go Fast Don't Die. We ended up just becoming friends and she was doing all sorts of great things. She's an amazing connector of people and she's great at telling stories just like you, Brady. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to chat because she's always interviewing interesting people. And so this isn't like a specific like motorcycle podcast. Obviously it's not that at all. It's just that she has such a wide scope of people. And I thought what a great opportunity to get you in front of her our audience. And Reena, I just thought Brady's just a very captivating person. I always tell this to people. You're a great storyteller. I always say that he's got great wisdom. So I think all in all, it'll be a good interview.
Aw, I love the
anyway.
warm handoff, and my dad is gonna love seeing you. It's been so long since you were on the podcast. I think like years.
I know. That was probably like 2018 or 19, like when you first started.
Yes, that was like when I just didn't even really
time
know the
for-
format, but I was just interviewing people who would give me some grace and had been a part of my path. So I'm so glad that we're still in touch.
I know, of course. It's time for a refresh. We'll have to do it again. All right, I will drop off. You guys have a great podcast. Enjoy.
Okay, I'll talk to you
Thanks
soon.
so much.
Thanks,
and bye-bye.
Shauna.
All right. Batman, where
Sup,
did that come
Reena?
from?
I actually have no idea. I don't think I've used Zoom in like a year, so I probably just set myself up as Batman and probably never turned my camera on.
Who taught you how to ride a bike?
A few people kind of taught me. I first learned to ride a bike. There's a little 50 when I was a young kid. My next door neighbor, Braden, he raced motocross. And so we went up and rode his bike. I had to be like 5 or 6, like real little. And I was so stoked. And they're like, all right, so here's how this. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, there's the throttle. And that's all I need to know. I got the rest. I've seen it done. And I just pinned it. And we were up in this like giant meadow in the mountains. And we went up this meadow because there's kind of like nothing to run into. Like, there's no trees. It's this big open meadow. And I hit the one boulder that was like buried by all this grass and flipped over and crashed. And then didn't ride a bike until I was like 18 again.
No way.
So yeah, so the Herbst family were the first ones to show me how to ride a bike, and then the Kraft family were the next ones to show me how to ride a bike when I was like 18. That's when I really learned and didn't crash. Well, I mean, I have crashed plenty of times, but I didn't crash when I was learning that time.
Oh man. Yeah. So how was it different to learn like when you were super young versus 18?
I mean, I never really learned when I was young. I just did. I was like, I don't need to, I didn't even want to hear it, you know? I was just like, hey, if Braden can ride it, I know I can ride it. So I see him out there doing it, like, I'm good. And I just pinned it. And then I don't even know, I was so young, it's hard for me to even remember, but it's the way that I remember it, I don't even think I knew how to stop. Once you go, you know, like you just whiskey throttle that thing and just pin it. And I was like, that's all I wanted to do was just go. And then I was going and I was like, I'm not actually sure what happens next. So I was just going full bore and then hit this little rock and flipped over the handlebars, and it was great.
That's crazy. I feel like
Yeah.
a bit of a bad mom because I have not taught my oldest how to ride a bike, and he's, about to graduate from high school.
Oh, yeah, you're not a bad mom. Maybe you're a great mom because you've kept them off. You've kept them safe up until then, or whenever he decides to. And maybe he doesn't want to ride. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all right too.
Have you ever seen anybody teach themselves?
Oh yeah, I have. I have seen people. I've actually tried to help people who didn't want the help. You know, they're like, I got. They were kind of like me when I was 6. Like, but actually there's one person, I won't name any names or give any context because I don't want my sister to be embarrassed. But when she got on a bike the first time, I don't know what instruction she was being given, but I don't think she wanted to listen to the person who was giving the instruction. And she just held the throttle, dropped the clutch, and ran right into the side of a house with her brand new Harley. After that, she had, the humility, and maybe I had a better, softer hand to be able to teach. She's determined, she wants to teach herself things. She wants to learn herself. She wants to, sometimes she gets in that I don't need anybody else energy,
I feel like people remember who taught them how to ride a bike. Like people do remember that.
For sure. Cause it's such a high stress, high intensity environment. It's a lot. You're like, oh, am I going to die right now? Like, especially depending on, so if you get an XR5 or an XR100, Honda XR100, that is the bike to learn on. Anybody can learn on that bike. The risk of injury is so low. It has a clutch. It has front brake, rear brake. It has the whole thing. But if you tip over, you can catch the bike. It's such a great bike to learn everything on. So we used to have a mini track, a little motocross track in the back of our shop. And I bought a handful of those and we would just race them in the back. And it was just low risk fun. Like, it was so much fun. And you could just wing those things everywhere. And anytime somebody wanted to learn how to ride, they're kind of casual and they're hanging around the shop, we just throw them on one of those and be like, and you could pretty much say like, hey, here's the clutch, here's the gas. And they could kill it and it was no problem. And they could whiskey throttle and it was really no problem. So XR100 is the way. If you're ever trying to teach somebody who, maybe it's not that comfortable, if you can go find a Honda XR100, they're like, probably spend $1,000 to buy one and you'll sell it for $1,000. They hold their value, but it's an awesome bike to learn anything on.
Nice. Where did your love of bikes begin?
The funny thing is like, I really don't even love bikes. I don't. Like, I know motorcycle enthusiasts, like genuine motorcycle enthusiasts, all they want to talk about is motorcycles and, compression ratios. And they want to talk about motors. And they want to talk about transmissions. And they want to talk about, what frame is that? And how did you put this together? And choppers and whatever motorcycle. I mean, there's that in every subculture of motor, in the ADV space, in the chopper space, and just the Harley and like aftermarket space and the Triumph. I mean, just kind of all, they run the gamut. And every time I talk to those people, I'm like, oh yeah, parts are cool and bikes are cool. But the thing that I love about motorcycles is that I have just severe ADHD. I bounce around a lot. It's very hard for me to focus on one thing. And somehow, in sort of a great depth, the great valley of my life, I got on my motorcycle that I was a casual rider of, and I took off, and somehow, I had so much going on, so much head trash and so much stuff going on. Something about putting my hands on the bars, my ass is planted in the seat, my feet are sitting on the pegs, and my eyes are entertained because, the landscape's constantly changing. Something about all of that kind of lines the cogs up in my brain to be able to put one thought or one feeling or one emotion or one instance in a hot plate, to set it on my brain and go, okay, we're going to think through all the parts of this. We're going to go back to the start of it. Which part of it actually hit? Which part of it hurt you? Which part of it was exciting? Why did you go there? And I could sit there and I could, I'd ride. In those days, I was riding like somewhere between 500 and 1,000 miles a day. And it was just meditation. It was genuinely, I've never been in such, I guess, peace or focus or just a meditative space as I was just crushing miles. And I would sit there and I had a lot to think about at that time. So yeah, I would just keep going. And I had music in my headphones, and my helmet over. And it just felt great. Yeah, that's the thing that I love, is it lines all that up for me. And then through that process, I met so many people who were like hearts and minds, who had a story behind why they rode, why they found peace out on this road that we shared. That's the thing I love. It's the culture of it. It's the like minds. It's the like hearts. I've seen so much of the world now because I chose to jump on the back of a bike when I felt sad. And I rode it right out of hell, kind of thing.
So was that starting in 2016?
Yeah, kind of. Really 2017 was sort of the beginning. 2016 for sure, like we rode, but it wasn't quite the same. So in 2015, 16, I was married for 5 years and we were together. We're like high school sweethearts. And
Oh, wow.
we were together for 8 years before that. So it was like I kind of had one relationship, and that all kind of just started coming unraveled about 2015 and through 2016. And in 2017, it was kind of officially done. And I kind of accepted defeat on something that I thought would be forever. And so kind of, handed in my papers and said, all right, well, there's nothing, I guess I'll hit the road. And so I did hit the road, and
I heard you say on another interview
off.
that like you had the white picket fence, like you had the life.
Yeah,
Can
I was
you
red.
paint that a little bit?
We had a red picket fence, but we did have
Red.
a picket fence. Yeah, I'm a big believer in marriage, in the concept of it. I feel like there's a lot of culture that we have right now that makes marriage. I don't have a lot of faith in us as much as I do, but when I was in, and I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And this is until death, until, one of us dies, we're doing this thing. And so not to say that we won't have, there won't be bumps and mountains to climb and, trenches to dig and all of that kind of stuff. That of course there will be, but I was all in. And, so we would go to the lake on the weekends kind of thing. I had started a business with my business partner, and yeah, dude, we were just kind of running the program. You watch a show at night and then you go to bed and then you wake up and it's morning and everybody goes to work. And then after work you come and like, oh, it was work, just that white picket fence life. And I was down. I was so down. I didn't need that was exciting enough. We rode motorcycles and, had good families and life was swell. It was good enough for me. And then when I suppose when I realized like this isn't going to be my life anymore, it takes two to tango, and a marriage with one person is not a marriage at all. So when I kind of got to that place, I was like, well, if I wasn't doing that, I certainly would have gone and done something outrageous. And so I was like, I guess I'll go do something outrageous, and so I rode my motorcycle and didn't really stop it until I got to down deep in the heart of Mexico. Yeah, I started just living pretty wildly for a while, off the back of a bike, and it was cool. And I met a lot of people and I had a lot of experience and lived a lot of life. I kind of got to this point where I sort of felt like my life was over. I'm sure that, a lot of people reach this point, they reach sort of their rock bottom and they're like, okay, this is this is it for me. And really there's like, one of two things happen. I suppose you decide to kill yourself and that's the end, or you don't, and that's not the end, right? The great Semisonic once said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And so it's a new beginning if it's not the end. In that beginning, I decided I would just go tell a better story with my life, or at least tell a new story on my way out. And I think that's the brand. That really is what the brand has become. And a tribe of people who want to tell a better story with their life. They want to get to whatever end that is. Whenever they reach that spot, they want to, when they flip back and they say, okay, here's me, I was born here. And then the rest of that story, they want to be stoked to tell. And it should have highs and lows, and it should have exciting parts and huge failures and big victories and beautiful little moments and all the color and dark times and light times and heroes. And, you want that in a story, and life gives that to you. You just have to choose. You just have to choose to take it. You have to choose to accept it. I think a lot of people kind of stand on the edge of that thing and they go, nah, 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 nah. That seems a little uncomfortable out there. That seems like I could lose out there, so I just won't play. And so the brand is when you just stand on the sidelines of your life's calling, of the thing you're supposed to do. That is just guaranteed defeat. And I promise you will reach the end and you'll wish you had stepped on the field. So the brand is really about encouraging people to step into their life's best story.
What is the story? What is the best story now? Start me from the beginning. Where were you born? What were the beautiful moments? What is the story you're telling now?
I was born here in Sheridan, Wyoming, which is still home, probably always will be home. Never say never, but I don't imagine another place being home. This is really where I feel right. I love to leave it, always have. And I probably spend about half my time, probably in the last 8 years, I've spent about half of my time on the road and half of my time at home, but it's a place I love to leave and love to come home to. So I was born here, went to school here. I never really left Sheridan other than, traveling and exploring other places and that kind of thing. And then once I started traveling on a motorcycle, like I said, I've been gone as much as I've been home. But I went to school. There's a lot to that story. But I think I've been called. I think, we all have a calling in our life. My big belief is that we all have something we're called to. There's something we're supposed to do. I think that a big part of my calling has been to contribute to and challenge culture. I was big in the punk rock scene when I was a teenager, and a lot of my friends, it was kind of wild because a lot of my friends, like, it really made sense for them. I tell stories about thinking that my friends had the coolest parents because they never had a curfew. Their parents never cared where they were, what they wore, what they were doing. Their parents were all so cool. It wasn't until later in life I realized, like, a lot of their parents just didn't care.
Ooh.
And my parents really cared, and a lot of the parents, they grew up in really dangerous environments even. And I remember being a kid being like, just kind of dealing with these things that as an adult, I would be sketched out to walk into. But as a kid, you're just like, okay, well, that guy's kind of crazy. And, like, he has a gun and there's drugs. Like, there's just like lots going on here. I was attracted to that thing. I was attracted to that scene. I liked finding beauty in the broken pieces. But the punk rock scene kind of had like sort of this weird one track, like, this is the way that it is. And I never really believed that. I always thought punk rock was sort of like a safe space. It was sort of a church for people that didn't belong, that didn't fit into whatever cosm, whatever subgroup was available. But like punk rock, it was kind of like we'll take all comers. When it wasn't like that, I kind of like, no, it is like that. And so, I went through this whole process of kind of quitting a band and stopping a lot of behavior that was destructive and starting a new thing and saying, hey, we're going to do punk rock, but we're going to do it this way. And having other people say, like, that's not punk. And me saying, I think that it is, which I felt like was the most punk rock thing one could do, was to challenge the status quo of these people that claim authority over what something is or isn't, which is art. It's like saying, like, someone saying, hey, that's not art. And anytime someone says, hey, that's not art, somebody should really pay attention to that, because, they're trying to lasso freedom. They're trying to put boundaries, bumper plates on this expansive thing. And I don't believe in that. And so Go Fast really has been a very similar project to come out and to say, our first line that we ever put out was ride whatever. So there was sort of this weird thing in motorcycles at the time where, 3 horns don't play with long necks. And if you don't ride a Harley, you can't ride with us, and if there's all these subcultures of moto, but people kind of were like elitists, or just like, this mean girl, you can't sit with us kind of thing. And I'm like, I don't know, man, that's not really my experience. I feel like I hang out in all these different subcultures and all these subgroups, and the heart of it is the same. And the expression of it, when you say that the expression of the heart has to look like this, you really limit that heart's expression. You really put boundaries on what someone can be. And so you can only know your best friends to the expanse of how much you let them be them. What kind of best friend would say, hey, just be like this, and then we can be friends? That's not it. As well as you can really only know yourself to the expanse that you allow yourself to live into. So people are limiting their own experience, their own expression of who they are by sort of accepting this box that somebody told them they had, this is the sandbox, don't play outside of it. And so our whole thing, the first thing we did was came out with a line that was entitled Ride Whatever. And the whole idea there, it really doesn't even have anything to do with motorcycles. It's just like, it's more like, hey, you do your thing. The heart of it is what matters, not the physical expression or the, what box you decide to fit into. And so we started riding we'd have a group of bikes go out, and we'd invite the dorkiest people, the misfits, like the genuine misfits, because there was a cool guy crowd. And so we'd show up with just a hodgepodge of weird individuals, and we still do, and people that, nobody else wanted to hang out with, or they kind of got cast out for whatever the thing is. And we just decided to celebrate those quirks. And so we had a group of we had some of the quote unquote coolest people, the people who they looked good, they act cool, they show up and kind of fit this whatever. And the thing is, somebody along the line just decided that was cool. The thing that we valued was individual expression. We think that thing is cool. So if you look the coolest and everybody likes you and blah, 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 but you are not being you have zero chance of success there. You can be successful in every way possible. And if you're not showing up as yourself, you're failing. And so, we tried to just encourage individual expression. Our next line was Outsiders. And actually our next line coming up will be Outsiders 3. It'll be our third kind of version, or our third iteration of this Outsiders concept. But it was all about, people who didn't fit within the primary culture there. They weren't the kind of the coolest kids in the block. They weren't the in crowd. And I've just never been, I love, do your thing. The in crowd is where you belong. If that's who you are, you like that, I love that. But if that's not where you belong, I encourage people not to aspire to belong there.
Wow.
So
that's super
I said a lot there.
interesting. I also was into punk rock music, so that took me back for a minute. But it's really interesting, the hindsight there of, were some of these kids able to go to the shows and dye their hair and pierce themselves and hang out at all these parties because they came from loving homes, or because they were latchkey kids? That is actually interesting, because I also felt that way. Like, hey, I'll just go spend the night at so-and-so's because I can get away with more there.
Right. Yeah. And, I remember being at shows. I think my biggest memory, one of my, just core memories of going to shows and trying to fit in, was I remember I went to the show, and it was this metal band. I was the first live show, and it was a big deal because it was Jeremy's brother was playing, and his big brother was the drummer for this band from Denver. And Denver's a big city, and we're all small town kids. And I went there, and at some point, one of the bands that was playing said, if you're not getting messed up, get out, right? Like little John in a metalhead voice. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm definitely trying to get drunk. Who has, do anyone have any alcohol that I could consume so I could become drunk? I had no interest in drinking. I didn't drink before that. That wasn't my thing. But as soon as he said, hey, you don't belong here unless you're doing this, I was like, well, I want to belong, so I'll do whatever, right? Whatever he would have said in that moment, I would have just done that, because I was insecure. I was trying to fit in. And I see people, they jump on that train and they ride it all the way straight to rock bottom in their lives. And some of them don't hit it until they're 50. They don't hit it until they're late in life, and then they're sad because they're late. And so the more we can kind of hold, when we started a new band, the more we can hold up a flag that says, hey, over here, you can just be whoever you want. And I remember, we'd have, we're in a town of 17,000, and we get 500 people to come to our shows. And it's not because we were the best punk band in the world, we were okay, you know what I mean? But definitely not everybody there loved our music. That wasn't the thing. It was because I would go invite 800 people and hand them a flyer and say, I would love it if you would come to our show. Even if you don't like the music, I promise it'll be a good time just to come hang, and you don't have anything better to do that night, I promise. That's only $5. I remember when people would show up, when you showed up and you're wearing your high top Vans, your skate shoes, or your cutoff jeans and your NoFX shirt, come on in. This is your
I think I have
your
Nirvana
place.
on right now.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so so then you fit in, right? Come on in. But we get the kids who are coming in wearing Nike and wearing, Allen Iverson shoes. And all of a sudden, this weird flip happened where they were the rejected ones, and people are like, why, what are you doing here? And the reason they were doing that was because the kid in Iverson's, at least these other kids, the way they felt was, we're not welcome with you. So now you're not welcome with us. And I'm like, you're just being the same thing, right? You're just taking the same behavior and reflecting it back. So how are you better? And how is this punk rock if everyone's not welcome here to fit in and, find a home and find community and have a culture where we don't judge people based on what they look like and what they're wearing and all of that, but who they are, which is, I think, the big goal of society. And that's been a suggested solution for a really long time, to kind of just like, yeah, everybody's like, I'm definitely down with that. And then they chuck it the first, instance they get when someone doesn't look like the thing that they wanted to look like. I'm just as guilty. But we started that with a punk rock band and said, hey, everyone's welcome. We don't care about your shoes. We don't care if you don't have shoes on. We don't care if you're wearing, $700, I don't even know what $700 shoes are, but like,
Me either.
I don't care, like whatever it is you've got on your feet, it makes no difference whether or not you get a green light for coming in here and showing up just exactly how you are. Just be kind. We invite you to like extend that same grace, that same love to everybody else here. And this is going to be a loving environment where we all smash into each other and scream lyrics that angry kids came up with, and all the emotions that you go through as a 15, 16-year-old kid. I wrote lyrics to all of those things, and we just scream them out, and other people would scream them out. It was the time of my life. And Go Fast, Don't Die is the same thing. It's just sort of the adult version with, we had a band as sort of the kind of like, hey, we play in a punk rock band. But it was never about a punk rock band, and it's never really been about motorcycles. It's much more about culture and community and creating a space where people can show up and be.
Weren't you modeling for Kmart at 15?
Yeah, I did do that. Yep. How'd you know that? That's a deep cut.
How'd you go from modeling for Kmart to punk rock shows? Those seem...
I definitely didn't. I went from punk rock shows to modeling for Kmart. I didn't have any tattoos yet. I had long hair. I don't know. I guess I just fit the bill. I think the way that thing came about was somebody was taking photos, like doing a photo shoot. They were in charge of this thing. And then I just got picked somehow. I'm not sure why or what, but it wasn't like a full-time gig. It was like a one-time thing. Where did you hear
your
about
mom
that?
submit you? She's like, oh, my cute son.
I think my mom accepted it, but I don't think she submitted me. I actually want to say it was like someone in our church who was doing it. And she was like, hey, can Brady do this thing? He's kind of, I don't know, must have been kind of cute or something. I'm not sure.
That's funny. You were talking about being a 15-year-old at these shows. And then I read on your social media that you were modeling for Kmart at 15. So I was like, huh, those are drastically different.
That is funny. I didn't even know my social media said that.
Also, I see that you have like a little Watts symbol like on your hand. What's the story behind that tattoo?
We all got those for my friend Sam's birthday. It's just like lightning bolts are kind of like the quintessential little sub logo for everything. So there's kind of light. If you look at any of our stuff, there's lightning bolts even in the logo. There's just lightning that's kind of built into it.
That's cool. Yeah. Now that my last name is Watts, I have a bunch of jewelry with that symbol too.
Oh, that's awesome. I got this for you actually. I didn't know.
There you go.
Until just now.
Prepping for the
Your
interview.
last name is Watts, huh?
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time listening to your uncle, grandpa, Alan. Do you know? I'm sure you do.
Alan Watts.
Yeah,
I
you
wish
know
we were
Alan Watts.
related.
Man, I've spent a lot of time with Alan Watts, just sitting in the headphones, just driving down the road and just losing my mind for a while. We've hung out a lot, me and that character.
Yeah, he's deep. So do you play guitar? Do you sing? I've seen
Yeah, I
you
do.
sing on some social media too. My dad loves singing and music. Do you want to give me some punk rock? Have you written anything?
My band ended pretty poorly, about as poorly as it could end. I think maybe I'm sure it could be worse, but I kind of quit music for a long time. Really, in the last couple of years, I keep trying to get back into it. I keep kind of trying. Like it definitely calls me. Like that phone is ringing, and I'll pick up a guitar and I'll write a song and I'll set it down and I'll go away for a while. But it's just sort of a vein to bleed from. I would love to actually pick it up again and actually write stuff, but I'll sit and write a song and then delete it and forget it, walk away. And it's just like that for me is so cathartic. Like it's so, I know it seems weird, right? Even when I say it, I'm like, well, you don't have to delete it, but yeah, I do have to. So anyway, someday.
Why
Actually, I had
throw it
this.
away? Just don't publish it. Like, keep it.
I don't know. I don't know. Like I've like, written it down on a piece of paper and thrown it in a fire and just burned it, and watched it burn. And then,
Whoa.
yeah, a friend of mine does that kind of constantly. I kind of got it from her. That just sort of reminded me of her, like felt like I was kind of like doing her thing. So I just like type it in a note and then I'll just delete the note. And it just feels great. It's like, okay, that's out. I just said all these things. I just put this out. It's like a diary entry and then boom, now it's gone. It's just like bloodletting, like you're just releasing some pressure kind of thing.
What did
So
you write
anyway,
about? Now I want to know. What did you throw away?
there's everything under the sun, love and loss and heartbreak and heartache and, dogs dying and trucks breaking down and anything you can write about, I've written about.
That sounds like country
The
music,
late,
not punk rock.
oh, well, they're cousins, I promise. The new school country, but like new school country is new school country, like give me a dirt road and a truck and, a cold beer and a girl, and mix those up every which direction and you're going to come out with a hit, which is great. I love that for what it is. I really like, old outlaw country. That's kind of my vibe. And I feel like it's almost like that and punk rock just almost depends on where you were born. You know what I mean? Or like the pace that you get into. Cause I feel like the heart of those, again, the heart of those things, just artists, they're called to express. And then they kind of like go out into the world and they have this deep feeling. And the more I learn about myself, the more I learn, like I have this, I'm really sensitive. I'm super sensitive. And that's why I am the way that I am. That's why I like kind of have to, I guess, protect my energy, but also why I get so excited about things. I get so pumped. Then I'll make a friend and I'll like start a new hobby and I'll like, I'm changing my life and I'm quitting everything and I'm going to start playing the piccolo, and then the next day I'll be like, oh, I forgot that I was even changing my life yesterday. I got to go back to this, whatever. But yeah, I think, you just find yourself in an environment. For me, I found punk rock because it's actually crazy. I think I was 13 or 14 when I first started playing in a band, and my friend Dan, who was also 13, he got sent away because he was on probation for drinking, and he was an alcoholic, like 13-year-old alcoholic, and he got sent away, and he played the bass for this band called Deviated Youth. They're like, do you want to play the bass? It's really easy. And I'm like, heck yeah, dude, I want to play the bass. So I started playing.
Everybody likes the bass player.
Right. Yeah, totally. Exactly. It was very safe. So, but then when I started my own thing, I had to switch to guitar because it's easier to find a bass player than it is a guitar player, I guess.
Yeah, you're totally taking me back with this whole conversation. Like when me and my husband moved back to Texas, we decided to like hit up all of his old stomping grounds that are like still standing. So we went to like his old favorite record store and we went to like the clubs that he used to go to. And I'm like, oh my God, we're like the 40 and 50-year-old in the club now. Like some of these people have stayed there, like in this scene.
I just love, when I see that, I'm just like, lean in, because I see people, it's like they can't take the environment away from you, but you can, like people they won't go to the thing because they're like, oh, we're the oldest people here kind of thing. And we used to come here when we were young. It's like, forget that, dude. You're the same person. You're the same, like the kid who is there now exists inside of you, and take him to the show, dude. What are you doing?
It was
Where are you in
cool.
Texas?
We're in Houston. We recently went to like a circle jerk show and then the Descendants were there. It was such a vibe. It was really cool. Yeah. It was such a mix of ages too.
Oh, totally. Well, both of those bands, those guys, they were hitting in the 80s.
Yep.
Descendants was OG. Circle Jerks were way OG. Like even those guys, they were like almost old school punk rock when I got into the scene. It was like you were cool if you knew about the Circle Jerks and the Descendants, Most people, like kind of your Fairweather fans, would know about like Bad Religion and NoFX. They'd kind of have the standard. Then you'd go back and like, yeah, I love that. And I love that the Descendants, I love that those guys are still playing,
Yeah.
And that's the thing is it's like they're still playing. It's not like they had some magic potion that kept them 25 years old. Like go out and freaking rip. And I hope my days of playing rock music are not over. They're just not back yet. The sunshine hasn't come out to grow those flowers yet.
Well, I've heard you ask someone, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? It sounds to me like music is on your agenda.
Yeah, 100%. I've believe so strongly in that I think the question is, what would you do even if you knew that you would? Right? So even if you knew that you would fail, that's like such a stronger question, I feel like, because, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? It's like, well, I would fly to the sun and surf on a solar ray, like, of course I would just do anything, because I knew I couldn't fail. But if there's something that you knew that you would fail, what would you do anyway? That's such a powerful question, because, that is your real calling. My big belief on success, diatribe here, but like success, when people think about success, the most people I talk to, there's sort of three buckets. There's money, fame, and power.
Yep.
And if they call someone successful, they have some version or some collection of either a lot of one of those or a good collection of all three or whatever. My big belief is that we all have a calling in life, and that no amount of money, fame, or power, if you're outside of your calling, no amount of money, fame, or power can deliver you to success. You will never be successful if you're outside of the thing you're called to do, regardless of if everybody else sees you as such. And no lack of money, fame, and power will ever make you not successful if you are answering to your calling. I think a lot of people who sort of become rich or become famous, they reach this point where they're like, I'm doing the thing where everybody looks at my situation and they call it success. They point at it and say, that person's very successful. And they are, they're depressed or they're sad because everyone told them, hey, once you get here, life is good. And they go, I don't feel that way. Do you know who Mike Posner is?
No, I don't.
You ever heard the song, if I could write you a song to make you fall in love, I already. You ever heard that song?
Yeah.
How about I took a pill in Ibiza? You ever heard that song?
Yeah.
So that's Mike Posner. And I had a really interesting little spout with him like a few years ago. I ended up in the same locker room as him, which is just a few of these really strange things have happened in my life. But he walked across America, and the whole time his message was keep going. And I hit him up because I was like, hey, I'm out riding my bike. Like, I'll come walk with you. He'd respond from time to time. Obviously, he's a popular guy and he gets lots of messages, but he would respond. He'd show up. I never did end up meeting up with him, but I was on my way to LA about the same time that he kind of finished his walk and made it to the ocean. I was on the plane there, and they're like, somebody was like, what are you doing in LA? I'm like, oh, ride some motorcycles, see some friends, maybe find Mike Posner and tell him to keep going, because he just completed this big task. And I'm like, his whole thing was keep going. Well, when you reach this goal, reaching goals is terrifying, especially to creatives. You get there because you get there and you kind of have set this thing out there, and you have this thing to walk towards. And usually when you get there, it's a very short-lived victory. And then you almost enter this weird depression because you're like, well, I'm here. Aren't I supposed to feel all good? Everything's supposed to be cool? I remember talking to Mike and didn't feel that way. He had millions of dollars and all the things that people would tell you. He's got money and fame and, influence and all that stuff. He wanted to go for a walk because he was like, I don't feel it. His dad died. Anyway, we ended up having some conversations, and then I ran into him in this yoga studio totally randomly on that trip. And I told him it was funny. I chatted in the locker room for a minute, and then I realized who I was talking to, because I didn't even realize who I was talking to until I was like, wait a second. And then I went out. I was like, hey, Mike. And he turned around. I was like, keep going. And it was like this such a fun, and then I went and did an hour and a half of hot yoga. The whole time I was in hot yoga, I was like, life is crazy. I'm bending like that. It's just the weirdest. How does my life end up like this? But that's just one instance of just when you choose to just go and do and just sort of put it in God's hands and start taking steps toward living in a way that you're called to live, regardless of what anybody else tells you. Things just happen, and it just feels like you're almost like, am I pulling the strings somehow? Am I in charge? I've had so many moments like that where you're just like, life's crazy. This couldn't be written better. No creative mind could write this story better. And I think that's back to your question you asked a long time ago, what's the story? What's all the things? That's it. It's just continuing to walk through and feel all the feelings, let them come, let them go, let them be, and continue to pursue a great story. Sometimes when we zoom so far into our lives, we zoom so close, we get freaked out because we're not exactly where we're supposed to be right in this moment. But when we zoom out and we go, we're all headed towards death. We just have a life to experience, enjoy everything, even the bad stuff. My grandpa died about a month ago now, which is crazy because it feels like it was yesterday. But it was my family just doesn't die. Like, we have not experienced death, and that one just hit, was like the patriarch of our family, and he's always been around. He's always been there. I just got back from Thailand, and he was always excited to just hear about the things that I would go out and do. Some of my other family is not as excited, that they're kind of like,
Aw.
oh, I'm sure you were out doing something awesome. Congratulations, sort of thing. Not in a bad way, but just in like I don't know. I just don't share as much. But my grandpa was always really stoked. But he just passed. And, during his funeral and just during that time, I really tried to, as I wrote in my journal and all the things, I really tried to be like, hey, this feeling that you're feeling, it's not pleasant, it's not joy, but it is profound and it's deep and it's important and it has intention. So like, let's let grief and sorrow kind of sit at the table and tell us what they have to say. These are messengers, all those feelings. And I think a lot of times we feel called to like, oh, don't be sad. Let's go get happy somehow. Let's go distract ourselves. Let's go drown this feeling, or let's go do something fun or whatever. What I've found, because I've ridden hundreds of thousands of miles trying to ride away from heartache, trying to ride away from this thing I didn't want to feel, it just comes with you. It'll just sit in your backpack and you're like, I got to get away from this weight. And I'm running with your backpack, trying to get away from your backpack, like, I'm exhausted. You're like, yeah, because you need to get in the backpack and you need to, take in what you need to take in. And then when you make peace with it, you can set it down and walk away from it, but until then, it's just going to sit as a heavy weight in your backpack. So yeah, when you zoom out, you're like, hey, everything is good. Everything is good. Even the bad stuff. Because you're living a story. You would never want to go watch a movie. Imagine this. You went and watched a movie like, hey, everything's awesome. And then it's awesome. And then the main character continues to have a great time. And then things kind of worked out in the end. That is the story plot of zero stories that you like. Every story, they find their challenge. They find their mountain. They find their dragon. And you have to believe that they might fail. You have to believe that they might not live, which very few stories, by the way, end up with the hero failing at his thing, right? But we still go watch the movie, even though we know, right? But we're like, you have to believe. You have to choose to believe, like, he might fail. This might not go right. And so if you have nothing in your life, or you don't allow the things in your life to come in and say, hey, this is really dangerous. You might fail. You might fall flat on your face. If you never do that, we have a shirt that says risk happy. You're not doing that. You're not risking happy. You're not risking the chance of having a great story to tell, which is the biggest risk of all. A lot of people, they want this safety that is zoomed in. I'm safe right now. I won't fall right now, but I'm withdrawn from the story I'm supposed to be living, that I'm called to live. And in the end of that story, you just guarantee yourself failure. It breaks my heart to think, because I've been there. I've been in the simulation of I'm at the end and I failed. And that is the worst feeling. And I wish that on no one. We exist to continue to encourage people to live the story that they're called to live. And it really has nothing to do with motorcycles. And some people, motorcycles is a part of that. Some people it's not. And everyone's welcome with us.
I love that. It's like back to the flyer of all age shows.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And it would be easier. We would be more commercially successful if we decided to be the cool kids. If we decided to just run the program that everyone's run in the past, that has kind of been a proven successful program. Again, no amount of success that we could find would ever make me feel successful, because I'm out of alignment with my calling. Yeah.
I can relate to that too, because I feel like no matter how many times I saw my name in the credits of a TV show, or how many celebrities I got to meet, or how many opportunities I've had, I'm always like wanting the next. It's really hard to lean into your calling and be happy with your wins. For me, I can definitely relate to that.
And a lot of times, we're sort of sold this bill of goods that those things that other people really value, that you would put on your resume.
Yep.
Like most people wouldn't put on their resume, like, I really, really love sunsets. Like I've taken the time, to watch 1,000 sunsets, without distraction. Most people wouldn't put that on their resume, but that, for me, like, that's something I'm so proud of and value so much. Like I love that
you've done that?
I don't know if I've sat and watched 1,000. I got to be close.
Wow.
When I see a sunset,
Yeah.
my thought is always like this, like, you go to Disneyland or Disney World, right? And it's sort of this massive spectrum spectacle. And you go, oh, wow. And people I see families plan for 5-10 years to take the family to Disneyland or Disney World. They save up money, they organize the thing, they go through the stress of, they either going on a plane with kids and family and all that, or driving across the country and, do I pull this thing over and spank everybody? I'll pull it, like they go through that whole thing, right? So that they can witness this sort of manufactured spectacle, which is very cool. Like they've done a great job. It's something, right? But the best day at Disney World does not rival a mediocre sunset. A sunset is like God's work wins every single time, and you're never going to see another one not exactly like it. You know what I mean? You're never going to see it's same river, different water. And so when you could just like sit and go, wow, look at these colors, look at like the expanse of the sky. Like man has never built something that takes over the entire sky, and the way that it pours light all over the land and everything is lit up in sort of this beautiful golden perfection that shows up in photos just beautifully. And like there's a reason photographers wait till sunset to shoot stuff. They wait till golden hour, and we get this golden hour every day, and most of the time we're busy looking at this whatever I'm looking at, like, and you're like, hey, right, it's like there's a woolly mammoth walking past you and you're like, hang on, I'm playing Sudoku or whatever, like the thing, like hang on, they're like, it's a woolly mammoth. Like, yeah. So anyway, you wouldn't put that on a resume. You would put, I've done this and I accomplished this thing. And they'd go, oh yeah, you've done this and this and this. Even though it's not the thing we value, it's the thing someone else values. So sometimes we're told the story that other people value X. And so we go and achieve X and we go, we did it. I met Kanye West. I'm never going to fail. People love that. They love that story, and they go, oh, you must be a really big deal. And so we end up like sort of leaning into that thing because someone else told us it was good instead of asking ourselves what we think is good. And that's when you end up in real big trouble because you put together your whole story based on someone else's values. And then you get the job that that person values so much that you never actually love, So yeah, the human experience, it's just a trip and it's all fun and it's all good. We're all learning and we're going to die learning, I hope. And some of us stop learning at 25 and live an extra 55 years. And I just don't want that for people. I want people to live every moment of their life.
I have one other
And
question that I'm just curious about. Like, you've obviously done a lot of thinking on your bike and on the road. Have you thought about like your legacy being tied to someone else's, or do you think your legacy is your own?
I think the biggest compliment, I really believe that before I kind of came up with that thought of how I define success that I shared, being in alignment with your calling, I always thought success is what people say about you at your funeral. Like if you can look at someone's funeral, that's when you can decide who they were, because who shows up, what caliber of people show up, what do they have to say, what story do they share, because that's when it ends, right? And until you're there, you can change your story. And as far as a legacy, I think anybody can say they are whatever they want to say they are. I'm this or I'm that. And if I was better at that, better at being kind of full of crap, I would probably be a lot more successful because I could go out and say, well, I'm this thing and I'm that thing. And I could make a dotted line of all the things that I've done and the ways that I've been successful. That's mostly just marketing and PR nonsense, right? Like that looks good on paper. I'm not great with that because it just feels inauthentic. It feels weird. It feels like you're playing a game where no one wins. But I really believe that if I died today, the people who showed up at my funeral would be a lot of people that I really look up to. And I think what they would have to say, while I wasn't there, I think what they would have to say would make me feel really proud of me. So, and I think that's about as far as your legacy goes. We definitely have these characters and these people who stand the test of time and live up to the history book. A lot that were not nearly as good as we thought they were, or we think that they are, and a lot that were way better than we could ever think. And I think at some point, the story of you is not actually the story of you. It's the story of how people recollect you after. You ever played that game of telephone where like you say a sentence and then you say the next sentence to the next person, and by the end it's a completely different sentence?
Yeah.
So by the end, that story of you is kind of garbled in the same way that first sentence is garbled when it goes through the thing. I don't think about legacy in the way of like, how will I be remembered in 100 years from now? I don't think that really matters. I think that's an ego thing. I think about like what impact will my actions and my example bring in 100 years, because because that I do believe lives on. And it's just not attached to your name. It's that it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit kind of thing. So if you can be kind to a stranger, if you can, tell them that they're fine the way they are and to lean into who they are, and you can help them find confidence, if you can, whatever, just be kind to someone or show them a different story so that they can't put people in boxes. I think that's really the biggest thing is I saw a world that put people in boxes and decided who they were based on what they could see. And my calling has always been to challenge that thing. So I like to look bad and be good. I like to bless people that have hurt me. I like to give more than I take. And I think that the impact on that is so much more than we'll ever be able to see. And it's way more than you'll ever be able to, than anyone will ever give you credit for. So forget the credit. Your legacy is what you give to the world. And it doesn't matter if it's attached to your name. And if you think it matters that it's attached to your name, that's just your ego, and your ego will get you killed. Your ego will kill you more times than any weapon ever will.
I love it. Is there anything that you'd like to ask my dad?
Yeah, I would love to ask your dad all kinds of things. So do I get to ask him? Do I get to ask him right now, or when?
Well, you can ask him right now, and then when I give you the final edit, he'll send you his response.
He'll chime in.
Yep.
I'm not a parent, but I think about parenthood all of the time. I would love to hear him talk about what makes a successful parent. For me, growing up, I feel like my mom and I kind of grew up a lot at the same time. Like I challenged her in so many ways, and she challenged me in so many ways. And the heart of that thing was love. There was love behind all of it. I wanted the best for her. She wanted the best for me, but I also wanted the best for me, which I felt like was the best for her, So we would challenge each other on all these things. And I know there were times where I'm sure she felt like a failure based on the way I showed up, or the way that people were asking her, oh, Brady is doing this thing, or he's hanging out with these kids, or he's acting this way, or he's wearing this shirt, he's doing skateboarding instead he dropped out of basketball or whatever. Yeah, I would just love to hear his thoughts on what makes a great parent, because I imagine that he is one, and I imagine that he's not perfect, and I imagine that he's had moments where he felt like he was terrible. It sounds to me like you have him on this podcast, he's a big part of your life. To me, I just see massive success. I congratulate him, my hat's off to him, and I think for me to listen to for my own encouragement in the future, and for anyone else who is a parent who is like, I suck at this. I would just love to hear his thoughts on when he thought he sucked at this, when he thought he was failing, when he thought he was successful and maybe wasn't, maybe when he thought he was failing was actually crushing. I would just love to hear him talk about that.
That's really sweet. I love that. And I could relate to that mom part. That's interesting too, where you guys are kind of growing up together and figuring it out together. I mean, my mom had me at 19. My parents were young parents. My dad was 23. So I think that he probably thought he was sucking in the beginning, and he's definitely matured. he's a much calmer dad now.
My thought on that, I hang out with my dad every single day. He's outside right now. My thought on that is that he probably was sucking. And I think that it was probably from a place of love. And he wanted so badly to do right by you. He wanted so badly to be a great father. And when you really, really care about something, everything gets activated. And when you feel like you're not doing a good job, you're bothered by it. And it usually makes you do a worse job because you think, this is such a big deal. I failed at this small thing and now I suck. And it's kind of this spiral. And eventually you see parents we have 5 in our family. And eventually, and I think the last 2 were way easier, the last 3 maybe were way easier than the first 2. And maybe the second one, who is me, made it way easier in the future because they're like, gosh, if I survived that. And you kind of realize, like, if your garden's not growing exactly the way you wanted it to and envisioned it and you wanted to, but you know that the soil is good, you know that it's getting water, you know that it's getting sunlight, it's just faith and time and patience. And once you see it come to fruition, it's like, hey, this isn't going the way I thought it was going. And then later on, you're like, oh, it all kind of worked out. And I shouldn't have freaked out so much in the beginning. I see that as kind of a consistent theme in parenthood. And I always just want to tell the early ones, which when I say early, I mean like 5 to 15 years old, 5 to 18-year-olds old, like, hey, just come from a place of love. Make sure whatever you're saying, whatever you're doing, forget about the tactics, forget about the way that it comes across, and make sure that where it's coming from is genuinely rooted in good soil, which is love, and it'll be all right. Because I'm sure that we did everything wrong in our communication and how we did things, and yelling at each other or whatever, disagreeing and not talking and poor communication. But I love my mom, and my mom loved me so much, and it all worked out, and I became who I was supposed to become. And and I am becoming who I'm supposed to be becoming. And I owe so much of that to my parents. So anyway, I would just love to hear your dad talk about that. I think that would be cool for me, and I'm sure cool for your audience.
And for
And
me.
probably for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for getting that tattoo for today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I've been waiting to find out what the heck I was getting it for. I was like, why do I have this? Someday I'll know. Felt like Harry Potter, you know? I have this bolt on my forehead. I didn't get it on my forehead, but
Yeah, that'd be scary. Yeah. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share?
I'm sure. I'm sure. You know, I told Shauna this. I love podcasts because no other platform or no other, communication. Like I would never call you, Reena, and be like, hey, Reena, it's Brady. I'd like to chat for about an hour about just the deepest stuff we can find to chat about. You'd be like, who? What? No, I got stuff to do. Right. But somehow we have this thing called a podcast where we go, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And you jump on with a stranger who becomes a friend, and they get to see you and they get to know you. And then there's an audience who gets to just sort of eavesdrop on this conversation and go, oh, cool. Oh, cool. Oh, cool. I'm okay. Them too. C.S. Lewis has a quote about like the moment of friendship begins is when you see someone and you go, oh, you too? I thought I was the only one. Yeah, podcasts. I would podcast from sun up to sundown, and just switch off whenever we're ready. I would do this all day long because I love the connection. I love the conversation. Oftentimes I walk away knowing more about myself because, you provided a mirror for me to say things. And I went, oh, I never really realized that, And so anyway, I'm sure there are a billion things, but I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, if you ever want to party again, if you got more questions, like I said, I'm so open. I love doing this stuff. I love talking about anything and everything. I really don't care that much about motorcycles. I care about culture and community and people and love and finding good soil to root in. So anytime.
I love that. That's so good.
You've heard from my mom. Now, let's switch it over to Grandpa.
Well, he's one cool dude, Brady. You see, he values his music and he likes riding motorcycles. But if you ask him, is he really into motorcycles and into music? Yes and no. He uses them as a tool to try to relax himself, but to be able to socialize, to be able to really get as a means to getting people's stories and where he can give his story. It's just a communication tool where everyone can do something that we enjoy doing and where we can relate to each other. So it's a very interesting concept where he even brings up, how people can be in cliques or in special groups or perceived values. And he's trying to throw that book out and say that whatever makes you feel good, we can all fit in and tell our stories without having to be in a box or be labeled. Just let it all go. They don't have to have boundaries. And if you want to look at a boundary, take a look at the sunset. Take a look at the world when the sun is moving in correlation with the earth, where you have day and night. The magnificence of nature and God's gifts to us all, and how there's a much bigger picture to things. We don't have to be microscopic, where we're just looking at every little thing and not seeing God's big, beautiful picture of seeing that humanity has a chance to interact and get to know each other without any so-called labels. So I really enjoyed that part of the interview. Then he put me on the stand to go over what it takes to really be a good parent. And really, they're related in some ways. Is that in the very beginning, you think that by controlling this and controlling that you can have an effect on your children where it all comes out exactly the way you plan it and exactly the way it's supposed to be, and where we have the mythology of making our children perfect. And the funny part is that we show our flaws more than our perfections to our children, and they catch up on it, and we don't even realize that we're not necessarily setting the very best of examples, because they start imitating some of our bad habits, throw it right back at us, and we go bananas.
Ain't that the truth?
Isn't that it? And the funny part is that my mom used to have a very famous saying, is have a few kids of your own, and then you'll find out how easy it is. It's very, very tough. And then she says, I just wish that somebody, one of yours, grows up to be just like you, and you see how you have to deal with it. And the irony is that that's exactly what happens, is that our children become really an offset of ourselves. It's very, very difficult sometimes to make ourselves perfect, let alone to set an example to make someone else perfect. Our best theory of being a good father or a good parent is to try to be involved with your children, to love your children, and to try to see what they really want to be able to do. And they're figuring it out just like you are. And give them the opportunity to learn and grow and experience things, and to be in their corner to catch them if they fall, but to see if they can, again, get back up on their own 2 feet and be able to stand strong and be proud. That's a lot of the things that have been passed on to me, and you find out that they really do work. And what's so ironic is that, when I was young, probably between 14 and 19, I thought I was one of the smartest people on earth. And my parents, I thought, were a little bit on the dumb side, maybe a little stupid and made a lot of stupid mistakes where I knew better than them. And as I got older, I found out, especially on the things that I thought I was 100% right and they were 100% wrong, it turned out that I was 100% wrong and they were 100% right. It's really funny how time has a chance to also teach us an important lesson as well, because the more we experience and we know, we find out that your perspective can change tremendously, and it's not easy to be a parent. It's a very, very big job. My grandmother used to say is that when somebody came into her store and they said, "What do you do for a living?" Didn't even realize she's the owner of the store. She says, "I take care of 4 children. That's a very big job." The girl didn't even understand that the girl running the store is my grandmother's store. And yet her first priority was always to make sure that her children had full access to her and knew that they could count on her for anything. That's what really a good parent's about, is where it's not just about yourself, but where your children really take the highest priority.
You're good at that.
I try.
Thanks for listening. Now I think I'm going to go call my dad.
I'll say goodbye and see you the next time.
Thanks for listening to the Better Call Daddy Show. Join us weekly for new episodes and more daddy wisdom.
Better Call Daddy is good advice always.
And love you, Grandpa, and love you, Mommy.
That's so cute. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. You can also find special episodes on my YouTube channel, and you can listen on Apple Podcasts,
On Good Pods,
Spotify, Amazon Music, Alexa, or your preferred podcatcher. That's a wrap for now.